welcome to Sparking Everyday Discipleship, where we disciple parents to disciple their children with everyday discipleship every day, sparking important conversations with our children. I'm your host, Terrie Hellard-Brown, and I'm so glad you've chosen to spend some time with us today. Our guest today is Gaylyn Williams, and she is the Executive Director of Relationship Resources. She is an award-winning, internationally recognized author of 41 books. She's just posted number 42, and a dynamic, inspirational, and motivational speaker. Her passion for Israel and empowering people to transform their relationships with God and others is demonstrated through her powerful books and training. She lives and serves in Israel part-time. She also counsels and speaks on dealing with stress in our lives. And that's what we're going to talk about mostly today, is how do we deal with stress and what is stress? So let's join the conversation. Thank you for joining us today. We have a special guest with us. Gaylyn Williams is here to talk with us today. And she has a great book that's just come out, All Stressed Up and Everywhere to Go. I think we can all relate to the title of the book. So, Gaylyn, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Well, you have to start by telling us about this book. What prompted you to write this book, and how did you come up with the title? I love it.
Well, first of all, I was doing workshops with my dad, training missionaries and other people around the world in these skills, these really practical skills on managing stress. And they were just impacting so many people that I wanted to make them available to people who don't go through the workshops, or they can have a workshop in their own church. But I wanted to make them available not just to the limited number of people that we were doing the workshops for, because I've seen amazing things that God has done through these practical, easy to apply principles that I apply myself when I start to get overwhelmed with stress. And you ask about where the name came up with. I was just sitting with a friend. We were kind of exploring options and what to call it. And, stress is such a heavy subject, or it can be a heavy subject, that it just seemed fun to do something like this to make it a little bit lighter.
I love it. I can't wait to get into this and you talk about some of these practical steps, because I know so many people who deal with stress and anxiety today. Just the anxiety seems to be so prevalent, and to know that there are practical ways, things we can apply today that can help us. So first of all, how prevalent have you seen that stress and anxiety is in America today?
Well, a recent survey showed that about 50% of Americans feel stressed, and 25%, when they're rating themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, say that their stress is an 8 out of 10, 8 to 10. I mean, that's overwhelming. That's probably in burnout or very close to burnout.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think leads to so much burnout? What should we be watching for that's putting us into that zone?
Well, part of it is staying stressed all the time and living just right on the edge. And yes, there are things in our lives that do just cause stress, but part of it is we need to learn how to understand what stress is and how it affects us. And when we start to see the ways that it's affecting us, what can I do to lower that stress? I mean, the first thing people need to do is learn about what stress is, because most people are unaware of what stress really is. And we often think of it as a stress situation. It's something that happens to us. But that is only one little piece of what stress is, because stress includes everything that we bring with us into a new stress situation, from our expectations, our fears, our anxieties, unforgiveness, and there's a whole ream of things that can affect our stress, and then that affects our perspective, and that can just blow stress totally out of the water, just make it so huge where it may have just been a little tiny thing that happened, And yet we can just blow it up because of all the stuff that we bring with us.
So I have so many questions. They all hit at the same time. Okay, my experience has been that when I have a stressful situation, and it might just be a tiny little thing that someone said, disapproving or whatever, and then I find myself spiraling into depression, discouragement, or just overwhelm. What would you say to someone who's dealing with that kind of a situation?
Breathe.
Yeah.
Well, I want to encourage people to take the time to study about stress and how it affects you and learn some practical principles that you can do when you get into a situation like that. Because there are just simple things you can do. And we have such a limited time today. I really can't go into all of them. But the first thing is learning about it and how does it affect me? How does it affect you? Because there was a time in my life when I would get stressed and I would get like chest pains and it felt like a heart attack. And so I actually went into the doctor and said, these are the symptoms I'm having. I said, it's probably just stress, because I was going through a lot right then. But nevertheless, he did some tests. But when I start feeling those feelings, then I'm going, okay, I am overstressed. I need to do something about it right now. So stress can either be a curse or a blessing. It can become a blessing when we listen to it. We listen to how it's affecting us and do something about it.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that most people think of, that stress is all negative. No, it's not all negative. We all need stress. I would not have gotten out of bed this morning. I would not have gotten dressed. I would not be sitting here if I didn't have some stress. So stress can be good up to a point, and we need to each figure out where is that point for us, where we are the most effective, because if we had no stress, then we would not be effective at all. So we need a certain amount, but we don't want to go over that amount for long periods of time. And yes, there's things that will come into our lives where we do go over and we have too much stress, but we don't want to live at that place.
All right. So I would like for you to define what you mean by stress so we can clearly know what we're talking about. So could you give us more of a definition for that?
So stress is our response as a whole person to events that happen. So it's not just the events. There's parts to stress. So there's the stress situation, and then there's our internal stress. It's what we bring with us into it that I talked about earlier with our expectations. And these can be towards God, ourselves, and others, but then also our sore spots like worries and fears, anxieties, unforgiveness, those types of things. So there's the stress situation, then there's the internal stress, then there's our perspective that can totally change, and it just like magnifies whatever has been happening. And then that is our total amount of stress. So it's all of that together.
Well, we know that in the Bible it tells us not to worry, to trust God, because we know there's good stress and bad stress. There's our reaction to it. Where do we step kind of over the line into the worry, into the unhealthiness, or step away from trust? How can we gauge that, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, probably, at least for me, anytime I start to worry or become afraid, I'm not trusting God. And when I recognize that, then I can go, okay, wait a minute. I need to stop and trust God, because worrying is not going to help my situation.
No.
It does not help any of our situations, but it is so natural. It's just a normal response. Usually fear is what might happen, because we're not usually afraid of what actually is happening, but we're afraid of what might happen. And the first thing, is just to stop and reaffirm our trust in God. And one of the things that I've started doing daily is, before I have a chance to be afraid or anxious, part of my time with the Lord is just to reaffirm, I will trust you, Lord. I choose to trust you no matter what I may encounter today. And yes, sometimes I go into worry and fear, but I wanted those times to become less and less so that I can quickly just start off with trust and keeping my focus on God. That is just so important and so helpful. And one verse that I love is Hebrews 12:2. It says, and there's different translations, but fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And then it goes on. But what I love about this is that what the Greek means for, it's one word for fixing our eyes. It's one word in Greek, but it has a dual meaning. And it means to look away from something and to look towards something. And I and you, we cannot be looking at our problems, no matter what that pile of problems is. We can't be looking at that and focusing on the Lord. So we have a choice to look away from our problems and look to the Lord. And can I just give you an illustration of when I was raising my sons? When my second son was born with multiple problems, and he was in and out of the hospital, mostly in for the first 3 months. And then when he was 3 months old, I was just anxious and fearful and struggling and thinking, I'm a missionary. These things aren't supposed to happen to me. And just focused on all of that. And then when he was about 3 months old, the doctor sat us down and basically gave us our son's death sentence. She said that he had 6 months to a year to live. And it was the most amazing thing, probably one of the most amazing things that have ever happened to me, because it was at that instant, while we were still sitting in the doctor's office, that it's like something just changed for me. I realized I had been trusting the doctors. I'd been trusting them to fix my son, and realized there's nothing they can do. My only hope is in God. He's my only hope for anything to change. From then on, I started really focusing in on him. And you probably know that little song, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And it doesn't say that the things of earth will go away. But they grow strangely dim. And I used to sing that song sometimes 30 or 40 times until I could get my eyes off of my situation. I mean, my situation was not good. My son, even though we had people all over the world praying for him and we were standing in faith, he was on high levels of oxygen, and many, many days he was so blue, even with the oxygen. I didn't think he was going to make it through the day. So I had a very real problem. But when I chose to turn my eyes to Jesus, then the fears, the anxiety, the stress, it went away. Now, it wasn't easy, and those fears, those anxieties, they kept wanting to rear their ugly little heads. So it was a choice I got to make every single day.
I so relate to what you're saying, but how would we explain to someone that we're not just saying deny that there's a problem and live in this pie in the sky, thinking about God, existence, like your affirmations and all of that our world talks a lot about right now? How can we clarify to people who are not quite understanding faith and focusing on God, even though we have these dire situations?
Well, we have to recognize what the situation is. And I had to recognize my son, apart from a miracle, he was dying. That was reality. But I got to choose in faith to focus on who God is And it was actually during that time that I started my first list of God's names so that I could focus on those. And I only had about 200 then. Now I have like 2,500 names of God, and actually wrote a couple of books on God's names. But there's something so powerful about just changing my focus. Yes, I recognize that there is a problem. I do have whatever all the situations are that we're facing, that to recognize those, but to choose to focus on God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also too, recognizing we're not walking through it alone. When we are acknowledging Christ in our lives, it helps us recognize too, he is walking right through those valleys with us and holding us up when necessary. I think that is such a powerful part of all of this, is to know that we are never going through this alone, whatever we're facing.
Oh, that's extremely important.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when we're going through things, it feels like we're alone.
It does, yeah. So how does stress affect us as people?
It can affect every part of us, whether physically, and they've done studies that have shown that most physical problems stem from stress. So it can cause or make physical problems worse, can affect us emotionally, which we all know that one.
Yeah.
But then it can also affect us spiritually and affect our relationship with God and our relationships with other people. So, I mean, stress affects our entire being.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we don't realize that. We know people who've gone through really hard times and their marriage has fallen apart, or they've wound up with unforgiveness and bitterness in a relationship. I know that I had an uncle who had just held on to unforgiveness for so long. And he came to the Lord over Christmas one year. And it was like we had gone on a vacation. So we had seen him before Christmas. And then we came back after Christmas, and he was a completely different person. And well, he had found Jesus, first of all, but he forgave. Wow. He kind of knew Jesus before, but because he was holding on to all of this forgiveness, he couldn't really have a relationship with God. And when he let go of all that unforgiveness, it set him free, literally, from so much. I mean, he even gave up smoking. I mean, it was like this whole transformation in his whole outlook on life and everything. And he would tell us this, at the core of it was holding on to that unforgiveness and bitterness. And man, God just took care of it. And it just radically changed his life. And he lived a very happy life from then on.
Wow.
For the most part, you know, it was just amazing to see such a transformation.
Oh, that's great. Now, one thing I want to say is sometimes you can just forgive and it's done. Yeah. Sometimes it's a process that we have to just keep forgiving and keep forgiving. Every time someone comes up on what they've done to us, which, I mean, the evil one wants to remind us.
Yes.
Of all the wrongs that have been done to us. So I just believe it is a process. Every time something comes up, we get to choose to say, once again, I forgive so-and-so for such and such, whatever it is that they did.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And that doesn't mean that we're a bad person and a failure. Like you said, the enemy's going to bring it back to our mind, even our own failures. He does the same thing with us, bringing that back up. And that can cause stress because we feel so unworthy and so much like a failure. And it can stop us in our tracks. We don't want to give the enemy that victory. We want to let God show us freedom and joy and peace and move along with him. And so, yeah, remembering those things are important. And one thing you mentioned too, fear. When we were missionaries in Taiwan, there were some situations that were quite frightening. And we were trying to discern God's will and make a decision not based on fear. And I can tell you, when you're in the thick of it, that is very hard to do. So we just kept praying, God, we don't want to make a decision based on our fear and what might happen. We want to know this is what you want us to do, especially when it came to leaving the mission field. One of our daughters was anorexic and was just too close to death. I mean, she was really in a bad situation, and we could not get her help in Taiwan. And so we were praying, what do we do? We were keeping the conversation open with her, working with what doctors we could find, but they just were not very helpful. So we were praying about what to do. And we actually finally really felt like God was saying, come on home. And so we left the field. And it was only a year earlier than we had planned to. We knew we were going to be leaving within the next year because our kids were grown and we needed to get them situated here in the States. But that was tough because my fear was my mama bear was, roaring, and I just wanted to protect my baby and get her help. And walking through that with her was so gut wrenching and so hard. And to find that we could hold on to our faith and hold on to our relationships with each other and keep moving toward health and healing was a challenge. But God is faithful, and we were able to finally discern, yes, we are supposed to leave. And my daughter did find healing. In fact, she's one of the most healthy people I know now. It's pretty amazing what God can do.
That's awesome. Yes. Yes. And we don't want to act out of fear. It's so easy to want to run from a situation because of fear. And yet, just listening to the Lord. And I've seen that same thing in my own life. I was a young missionary down in Guatemala. When most nights when we'd go to bed, we'd hear gunshots and bombs going off. And then I also, at the same time period, had a friend who had been captured by terrorists down in Colombia and was actually killed for his faith. Between that and choosing to trust God, but then also now, as you know, I live in Israel part-time. And just some opportunities there where I have so much learned how important it is to listen to the Lord, to be able to hear him, to hear what he has to say and not walk in fear. A couple of situations where if I hadn't been listening, then I could have very well been killed because God took me into some situations that could have been extremely fearful. But because I was hearing him, it's like, okay, I'm going to trust you. I don't understand, but I will trust you.
Well, how have you seen these principles that you use in your life and that you teach and write about? How have they transformed people's lives?
Well, a lot of people have been able to stay serving God wherever they are because they've learned how to deal with their stress. One pastor actually is alive today because of this, because he was just so stressed and ready to take his life. And I had been talking to him and I said, would you like me to send you a copy of my book? And I can't remember whether I sent a hard copy or by email. And he later said that saved his life.
Wow.
So just a whole variety of ways that God has used this in people's lives.
Well, and we know the enemy, he wants to kill, steal, and destroy. I mean, if we can just remember that, because it seems to me, if you look at a stressful situation, a negative situation, a hard situation, it's natural process, if we're not focusing on God, to lead us to self-destruction, to, giving up or taking our own life or quitting whatever that God has for us. That's what the enemy is trying to get to happen. If we can find victory and we can find tools that can help us master this and trust God more, what a blessing that would be. And I know that you've developed 52 stress management tips that you're going to make available to our audience. How can they find those?
Yes, you can go to my website. It's the ministry that I run is Relationship Resources. And the webpage is relationshipresources.org. And on that front page, you'll see over on the right-hand side something about get 52 free stress management tips. And what I will do is I'll send those to you one a week. They're very short. They're easy to apply because if you're stressed, you don't need some big things to do. But just short, little, easy to apply strategies.
Okay. And we will have that link in the show notes as well, so people can link right to that. And where can they find your books? Because you have a lot of books, right? Not just this one we're talking about. You have, how many books have you written?
41. Actually, the 42nd one, I just got it uploaded today.
Wow. Okay. So where can we find your books?
You can find them on relationshipresources.org. Yes, and so the information on a lot of them, they're not all on there, but most of them are on there. And then that will take you to Amazon to buy them.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
you get free shipping if you have
Yes,
Prime.
that's true. Well, what message would you like my audience to leave with today? What would you like them to understand?
There is hope. We don't have to live overstressed. The Lord is there with us. The Lord is there with you, whatever you're going through, whatever is happening in your life. And there is hope. There are ways that you can cope with the stress, and not just cope and not just survive, but actually thrive and do better, so that you can become more and more of who God has called you to be.
That's wonderful. I love that. And that's such an encouragement to know that we can have victory. We don't just have to trudge through and try to survive. We can thrive. We can find victory. The Bible says we're meant to be overcomers, and with God's help, we can. I'm just so thankful that God has given you the guidance to help others, and you have come through so many things. You worked with Wycliffe. Where were you with Wycliffe? Was that in Guatemala?
In Guatemala, and then later in California.
Okay. And you said you live part-time in Israel. So that's certainly not the safest place on earth.
No.
Well, tell us briefly before we go today, just tell us about your ministry that you're doing with Israel and the different things that God has you working with at this time in your life.
Oh, there's so many different things. But one of them is when I first started living in Israel in 2016, and just part-time, the Lord told me I was going to be writing a book about Israel. And I'm going, what's the topic? Because that's a huge topic. Then a few years ago, he showed me that it was on his heart for Israel. And so many people are like I was, where I thought that as Christians and as the church, we have replaced Israel. We have not replaced Israel. We've been grafted in, and we get to take part in all the promises, but we have not commandeered them. So I wrote this book, and I keep asking the Lord, when can I go back to Israel? When can I go back? And he keeps saying, I'm impacting Israel more from here than I could from there, because I'm helping Christians to understand God's heart for Israel, and that his promises are still true today that he made way back 2,000-3,000 years ago. And he's going to keep his promises. So often I'll ask people, do you believe God keeps his promises? And across the board, Christians will say, oh, yes. But then the second question, do you believe God keeps his promises for Israel? And sometimes people will go, But I mean, he's the same God. If he doesn't keep his promises for them, then why should we think he's going to keep his promises for us?
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I have a few Jewish friends, and one says she's Jewish. Culture-wise, she's Jewish. Food-wise, she cooks amazing food. What would you say to someone who is Jewish but doesn't see Jesus as the Messiah, or understand that God is still at work among the Israel nation? What encouragement or what word would you give to them?
Well, first off, don't try to convert them, because they have their antennas up and they have been treated so horribly by people in the name of God for so long that if you try to convert them, they're going to run. So become their friend. Be a friend and just be there. And you may want to even apologize on behalf of Christians for all the atrocities that have been done to them. Yeah, just mostly be their friend and let them know that as Christians, we love them. We love Jews. We love Israel, and we are standing with them, because that's really, really important.
It was interesting because my friend's son came to we had a Passover meal at our church, and he read the Hebrew part because he could speak Hebrew. And afterwards, we sat for like 45 minutes, and he just asked questions, and we tried to answer his questions. And it was so much fun to just talk with him and try to answer his questions. God was really working on him and speaking to his heart. He was not sure he was understanding why we would do Passover, why we were interested in Jewish things at all. And he said, "So do you feel like you're kind of Jewish now?" And I didn't say grafted, I used adopted, that we've been adopted in. So these things are important to us too. And so it was like, oh, it helped him to understand that connection. I don't know where he is now because we moved away not long after that, but I was so thankful for that conversation and that opportunity. Of course, I pray for him and his family all the time. But that was fun to hear his perspective and hear his questions and how he was understanding the situation. So that was fun. Anything else you'd like to share before we go today?
I just pray God's blessings on each one who is watching or listening now or later, and that God will just work in your life and help you to be able to effectively manage stress so that you can be all that He created you to be.
Amen. That's good. And that is my prayer too.
One more thing can I add?
Oh, yes, please.
The book on stress, each chapter has how to help other people and how to help children to manage their stress, because children have a lot of stress, a lot more stress on them in these days. So there are ways that you can help your children to manage their stress.
I am so glad you said that, because I totally intended to talk about that. It just went out of my mind and I didn't think about it. But yes, that is something so important. How do we as parents help our kids learn to cope with stress? So we can find those answers in your book. That's great. And leave us with one pointer today that we can apply as we end this interview to help us either hold on to faith or let go of stress a little bit.
Well, what I shared from Hebrews 12:2, fix your eyes on Jesus. And remember that has the dual meaning. You have to take your eyes off of your problems. And yes, we do need to be aware of them. And like our children, we can't just forget about them, but we can't be focused on the problems that are there. Mm-hmm. We need to focus in on Jesus, on the Lord, and on who He is and His greatness.
All right. Good word. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you again in the future. You have such a fascinating life. I hope everyone goes to your website and just looks at all the adventures you've had and looks at the different books you offer. I think they'll be really blessed.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for spending time with us today. If we sparked any questions or you want to share a comment, we would love to hear from you. I want to let you know about our discipleship coaching groups. In these groups, you get to ask your questions and share concerns you're facing in raising your children, leading them, and discipling them. If you have anything you have questions about with homeschooling or any struggles there, we're happy to coach you and help you. You can join the once-a-month group that meets for 1 hour each month on Zoom, or the bi-monthly group that meets twice a month for 90 minutes each time. And each time we address your specific questions and help find strategies to handle the situations well. You can go to my information page from the link in the show notes, and also we have private coaching available as well if you need to make some sort of strategy or plan or are dealing with something you really want to tackle one-on-one. I hope these will encourage you and help you, and you can also join our free group on Facebook, Everyday Discipleship Every Day. Just ask to join and we'd love to have you there. But most of all, we pray you feel empowered, equipped, and encouraged to walk by faith and to embrace everyday discipleship every day with the people in your life.